In this lesson, we'll talk about Delta Lake. So, what is Delta Lake? So, to understand what is Delta Lake, let's take a look at how typically when you work with Databricks, how typically we work with files, which is your data files for, your data. So, whenever someone like a data engineers load a table, typically this table will go to the storage. So this storage will be like EDLS in case of Azure, S3 in case of AWS, Google Cloud Storage in case of Google Cloud. And inside the storage, you'll find the typical files where you have stored your data. This could be files usually could be in different formats. For example, could be CSV file, could be Parquet files or ORC files, depending on different formats of the data that you wanted to work with. Now, whenever you wanted to have Databricks read or write or manipulate or process this data, Databricks will typically start a cluster, let's say a 3-node cluster, and this cluster will go to the storage and start reading the data. So you can process your data and so on. But you're kind of limited with what you could do because of the format of the data. So CSV, Parquet, ORC. For example, a typical operation for loading this data is read the data. So you can read the whole file, maybe convert it to a table or something. But what if you wanted to delete one record of the file? What if you wanted to append more data to the file incrementally? What if you wanted to use this data for merging between two tables and so on? This is where it gets more tricky without having a storage management layer or a data management layer in between the cluster and the storage. And that's exactly what Delta Lake does. Because typically without Delta Lake, if you wanted to read, you can read the data perfectly fine. But if you wanted to modify the data, let's say you read an ORC file, if you wanted to modify one record or delete one record, you will do that in the data frame, but then you will have to rewrite the whole data frame on the disk to become another ORC file. So ORC file version 2, for example. And if you delete another record, you have to rewrite the whole thing. So become version 3 and so on and so forth. So you're thinking like, if this is 1 terabyte table, do you really have to read the whole table, delete one record and write another 1 terabyte again to the storage? That's really, doesn't make sense because you just want to delete one record, especially for cases where deleting data is becoming mandatory, like GDPR compliance, for example. In GDPR, there is the right to forget. And the part of the right to forget is to delete the user data from everywhere in the system, not only the operational data stores, but also from the analytics data as well. So you can do that pretty much with the standard formats. What Delta Lake has done is to abstract your access to this data. So you no longer have to read the data directly. There will be a layer in between called Delta. Delta Lake. And then you will convert these files to what we call Delta format. Delta format. So with that specific change or with this symbol change, then you can do updates, deletes, incremental loading. All the features of Delta will be there supported for you. So you no longer need to read the whole file, delete one record, and write it again. No, you can perfectly write, delete the record in place. So how does Delta does this? So basically, what Delta do is Delta is actually open source format. Everything in Delta Lake is open source. Everything. Delta is perfectly a full open source project. Like all the features of Delta are open source. So Delta is still an open source format. Delta format is actually using Parquet format behind the scene. So all the files that you have here, CSV, Parquet, ORC, whatever, when you convert to Delta, they will become a Parquet file. Parquet file. However, this Parquet file will have an additional folder next to it called delta_log. And this file all the changes that you make from deleting a file, deleting a record, updating a record, merging a record, all the data manipulation that you will do against this file will be stored in this log as a JSON file. When you read the data, when you read the file, Databricks or Delta will merge the changes in place to give you the latest snapshot of the file. So let's say you read the original file is in Parquet format, you deleted the record. You actually don't delete the record in the file. The deleted change is it's stored in the Delta log as a JSON format that says this record has been deleted. Now, when you read the file from your cluster, Delta will read the original file, apply the changes, and give you the latest snapshot. And then later on, Delta will merge these changes to your Parquet. So kind of like do it over a longer interval rather than doing it on place. And this saves a lot of performance, and this is very, very fast operation. It does like save you a ton of waiting time to read and write the whole file. So think of Delta as a data management layer or a storage management layer for your files to simplify working with data. And Delta is a fully open source project, and it has been around for probably 6 or 7 years now. I think 2017 or 16. So Delta is really, and it's the most widely used data management layer or table formats for the big data analytics. If you compare it to Iceberg or Hoodoo or Hoodie, Apache Iceberg, Delta by far is the best of all of them, from performance, from accessibility, from support of the community, from everything. So if you're working with Databricks, make sure that all your files and tables and everything is Delta format, because this is where you get all the best performance, all the best, security, caching, data management layer. It's all there for you for Delta. So make sure whenever you read or write or data, the first thing that you would do is to use the Delta format. So thanks for listening, and see you in the next lesson.